In the late 1930s, the newspapers wrote about the affair between Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh. They think about each other more than about money, career, more than about life itself. Their love tramples on convention and astonishes with its wild unruliness. And indeed, it was a strange love. Strange and unfathomable. Sensation. The highlight of the London theatrical season of 1935 is Romeo and Juliet with the magnificent Laurence Olivier. A young lady in the second row is shamelessly bothering those around her with an outpouring of emotion, and that is so un-English. At the sight of Romeo Olivier, she rises from her seat and lets out languorous sighs, more suited to a secluded place than to an auditorium. Romeo on stage is, in truth, not quite traditional. There is little of the customary romance in him. He is a tempestuous, rough-edged boy, bursting with the impatient sexual longings of adolescence. Yet it seems that this is exactly what enchants the woman in the second row. In the middle of the action, her loud exclamation rings out, "Oh, what a virile performance!" After the performance, the lady hurries backstage, where her hero sits exhausted and dripping with sweat. Yielding to an irresistible impulse, she kneels before him and kisses his muscular bare shoulder, and then Romeo Olivier recognizes her. Vivien Leigh. He had seen her not long before in the play The Mask of Virtue. Even then, the actor understood that he was looking at the most irresistible woman in the world. There was something tormenting in her magical beauty. Fragility coupled with the firm line of the chin, emerald eyes of astonishing shape, a soft break in the eyebrows, and the gaze of a panther, he later recalled. For some reason, Vivien's impetuous, frank kiss frightened Laurence. He almost physically felt how the tender touch of the panther had scratched his skin. At 29, he had already earned a reputation as one of the most gifted actors of the English stage. His private life, too, had turned out as well as one could wish, for he had won the hand of the beauty Jill Esmond, and by marrying her, had entered one of the most renowned theatrical clans in England. Esmond's parents, like her grandmother, were among the most celebrated actors of the London stage at that time. Laurence loved Jill. Jill loved Laurence, and nothing appeared to threaten their happiness. In short, Laurence Olivier had every reason to consider himself a lucky man. One rainy evening in 1935, the couple went to the Savoy Grill to celebrate in private a joyful event. They had just learned that Jill was expecting a child. A few tables away, the Oliviers spotted a familiar pair, Vivien Leigh in the company of the actor John Buckmaster. "How can her husband let her go out alone to restaurants with just anyone?" Jill remarked. "So she is married?" Laurence blurted out with a strange sense of relief. Jill looked at him suspiciously. "As if you did not know. Her husband is some tedious, ordinary solicitor, Lee Holman. They even have a child, a daughter. They say she is a very poor mother." At that very moment, there was lively conversation at the table of Leigh and Buckmaster. "Larry had to part with his good looks for the sake of playing Romeo," Buckmaster observed venomously. "How foolish he looks without a mustache." Vivien's reply sounded provocatively loud, so loud, in fact, that it reached the ears of the Oliviers. "I, on the contrary, find that Mr. Olivier looks divine, exactly like the man of my dreams, and I would passionately like to marry such a man." Jill stared at her husband in frozen bewilderment, while Laurence first felt the urge to sink through the floor, and then he was seized by fear. This vague, inexplicable fear would pursue him for a long time. Not only when meeting Mrs. Holman, Vivien Leigh's legal married name, but even at the mere mention of her. That, however, did not prevent him from going to her performances again and again. The actress's magical beauty seemed to bewitch him. Before the final curtain, Laurence would usually wrestle with himself so as not to go backstage, and he always went. Mrs. Holman languorously held out her hand for him to kiss, and he devoured her with his eyes. One day she said, "I can see you want to eat me. Eat me." She trickled a little honey onto her palm and held out her hand to Laurence again. He backed toward the door and hastily took his leave. From then on, he avoided her. He loved Jill, and Jill loved him. And he so sincerely wanted calm and well-being. In essence, he wanted nothing from life but the chance to bury himself in work and in roles, so that no one would disturb him from living on stage. Jill never interfered. What interfered was some splinter of unknown origin lodged in his heart. Now, whenever he left for filming, Olivier rejoiced that he would be far from temptation. And from what temptation, exactly? Laurence asked himself bleakly, and was afraid to find the answer. The answer came by itself, or rather, it arrived, when no one expected it. Filming of the picture Moscow Nights was taking place far from London. Sitting in his room after a tiring day's work, Olivier suddenly heard her voice, asking after him. Without a second's thought, he dashed to the window, jumped from the first floor into the bushes, and crouching like a fugitive, ran into the park. There he sat for 3 hours at least. The film's director, Olivier's friend Anthony Asquith, later recounted that Vivien Leigh, so gentle and angelically beautiful, flew into a genuine rage upon learning that Olivier could not be found. I never expected that such a delicate creature could turn into a fury," Anthony said. On the 8th of April, 1936, there was the long-awaited London premiere of the play The Happy Hypocrite, featuring Vivien Leigh. Laurence Olivier attended with his wife. Jill was in a very depressed state. She feared the approaching birth, and she was weighed down by the nervous tension in which her husband had increasingly been in recent times. Wishing somehow to cheer her up, Olivier leaned toward her and whispered tenderly, "Jill, we shall surely have a son, and I shall name him Tarquin." After the performance, Laurence suggested that Jill go backstage to congratulate Vivien. The actress's dressing room buzzed with a swarm of admirers and journalists. Vivien, excited, received their congratulations. Olivier introduced Jill, whom Vivien was meeting for the first time. Casting a strange glance at Jill's rounded belly, Vivien suddenly burst out, "How is our little Tarquin?" Even 20 years later, remembering this episode, Olivier felt embarrassment. At the time, he felt despair. The secret had become public. In front of everyone, colleagues, admirers, reporters. Tomorrow, all of London would know that Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh were lovers. "Jill, save me. I do not know what to do. I am lost. I do not want to be with her. I want to be with you and our child," Olivier pleaded at Jill's feet. And, as in a bad film, at that very moment a telegram was brought to him. "I have informed my husband, Leigh Holman, that I am leaving him and joining my life to yours. I trust you have also discussed with your wife the terms of your divorce. Devotedly yours, Viv." In the leading Hollywood magazine, Photoplay, in December of 1939, there appeared an article entitled, "A Love Worth Fighting For." It told of the tempestuous romance of Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier, a romance that overrode career, trampled on convention, forgot reason, and laughed with the swelling, joyful sense of its own unruliness. "Each of them has a child," the article went on, whom they may be forbidden to see. They are likely forced to listen to a great many cruel things about themselves, for the English are not inclined to hush up matters such as this. But more than anything else, they think about each other. More than about money or career. More than about life itself. Having read the first publication about their private life, Laurence grimaced with distaste. It was obvious that the studio had paid the journalist well for this saccharine drivel, released neatly on the eve of the American premiere of Gone with the Wind, the film that brought Vivien Leigh, the performer of Scarlett O'Hara, worldwide fame. If the matter had been left to take its course, reporters would undoubtedly have damaged the reputation of the national darling, Scarlett, with stories of a delicate divorce proceeding, of how Scarlett Vivien was living under the same roof with her lover in America, while leaving her own child in the care of her husband far away in England. In that case, Vivien Leigh would not have seen such success, nor would he himself, for that matter. After Wuthering Heights, Laurence Olivier had become one of the actors most beloved by Americans. Whether Olivier was happy with Vivien is hard to say, but that he lived in constant perplexity and felt a kind of indistinct anxiety, that is beyond doubt. Having won Olivier, Vivien quite unexpectedly turned from a fatal woman into a child, tender and obedient. He even invented a nickname for her, Kitten. Parting from him for 3 or 4 days, Vivien would burst into tears and demand vows of eternal love. Yet this did not flatter Laurence in the least. It frightened him, rather, that she so clearly could no longer do without him. When Olivier was playing on the Broadway stage in New York, and Vivien was filming her next picture in Hollywood, she stipulated in her contract weekly paid trips to see him. Once Alexander Korda, the director of the later famous film That Hamilton Woman, refused to let Vivien go to New York, where Olivier had slipped away for a short while. Vivien flew into an indescribable rage, grabbed a stick that happened to be at hand, and nearly beat Korda. She was pulled away just in time. Olivier refused to believe the story, and Vivien herself did not utter a word about the incident. Yet, despite the fact that Leigh and Olivier everywhere tried to appear a passionate romantic couple, Korda, who had observed them closely for several years, did not particularly trust in their ardor. He, for example, stubbornly refused to film them together, saying that on the screen, which supposedly never lies, the necessary connection did not occur between them. True, after That Hamilton Woman, in which Leigh and Olivier played together, Korda did acknowledge that this was perhaps the one document in which they appear as though truly in love with each other. Soon Laurence had occasion to realize that his tender kitten could turn back into a panther. The Oliviers, who had married in August of 1940, once found themselves at a party hosted by George Cukor. Greta Garbo was there as well. Olivier was the very soul of gallantry. Offering Garbo his arm, he led her for a stroll in the garden. When they returned, Vivien pleasantly asked whether they had had a good walk, and then, coming right up to her husband, landed him a resounding slap. At home, Vivien wept, childishly begged forgiveness, and said that she herself did not understand how such a thing could have happened. In the days that followed, she was so tender that Olivier's heart thawed. But deep inside, that same old fear stirred, the fear he had felt in the early days of their affair. More and more often he heard reports that Vivien was prone to outbursts on set, that in a fit of fury she could shout, insult, and smash everything around her. Looking at the angelic creature with innocent emerald eyes and a fragile figure, it was hard to imagine. Friends advised Olivier to consult a psychiatrist. No sooner had the doctor heard that Vivien had left a young daughter in England and saw her not even every year, then he said without hesitation that Vivien's manic states were tied to her longing for her child and for motherhood. "The only solution for you, Mr. Olivier," the doctor politely advised, "is to have a child as soon as possible. I believe this is the one remedy that could help your wife regain peace of mind." Olivier left the doctor buoyant and full of joyful hope. He himself, after all, was tormented by guilt over the son he had left behind, so the solution the doctor proposed could well become a cure for him too. Alas, in September of 1942, Vivien suffered a miscarriage. Olivier believed that his wife had been overworking, and that the unending succession of films and plays gave no chance for rest. Vivien comforted her husband in a rather peculiar way. "Where he has gone from, there will be very, very many more." But the heaviest trial for Laurence was a strange and unpleasant party game that Vivien now offered guests. It was called Ways to Kill a Baby. The participants took turns using gestures to depict some unusual method of disposing of an unwanted child. Even allowing for English eccentricity, the game provoked ill-natured gossip in Hollywood. Rumors began to spread that this Vivien Leigh was a person of considerable oddities. However, when she began the long-awaited filming of Caesar and Cleopatra in 1944, Vivien already knew that she was carrying Olivier's child. She looked happy and absolutely serene. A complete idyll settled over the couple's life. Laurence literally carried her in his arms and blew specks of dust off her. On the set, they were working on a scene in which Vivien as Cleopatra, armed with a lash, beats a fat assassin slave, driving him from the palace. She lays into him with gusto, and then, raising her hands to the heavens in a paroxysm of exaltation, exclaims, "At last I am a queen, a real queen." The scene astonishes everyone who watches it, including Olivier. Vivien receives rapturous applause. A couple of days later, Laurence receives a letter from the doctor he had once consulted. The doctor receives him with embarrassment. "You see, Mr. Olivier," he mumbles, "the other day I had occasion to see your wife in one of the scenes of Cleopatra. She is indisputably an outstanding actress. I was overwhelmed. But I believe I was once indiscreet enough to advise you to have children. I was wrong. Do not do it, Mr. Olivier. She does not need to have any more children." "I do not believe a single word," the actor shouted in fury. "We want a child, and no one can prevent us from having one." And he slammed the door. "At last I am a queen, a real queen," Vivien Leigh cries ecstatically. They are shooting yet another take of the familiar scene. "Queen Cleopatra," she shouts even louder. "Do you hear? I am Cleopatra." Her face turns crimson, and she begins to breathe heavily. "Come on, all of you, get out of here. At once. I am the queen." Vivien screams, but these are no longer words from the role. Vivien is having a seizure. In her agitation, she slipped on the smooth floor and fell. Olivier is utterly crushed and miserable. Vivien is ill. She is prescribed bed rest. He feeds her broth with a spoon, coaxes her as if she were a child, and she pouts and reproaches him for not loving her. "Come now, Viv, for the sake of our child," he begs, and does not believe his own words. Now he is afraid not only of her, he is afraid of himself. He is afraid that he wishes death upon this child not yet born. Such guilt he could no longer bear. Olivier cannot sleep. Nightmares torment him. Once he dreamed that he killed Vivien, and the next day she miscarried. A little more time would pass, and as they were sitting on a veranda at luncheon in the open air, Vivien would suddenly say to Laurence in a matter-of-fact, almost businesslike tone, I no longer love you." For him, it was like a bolt from the blue. After all, it seemed to him that he still loved her. But within minutes he felt a sense of vast, inexpressible relief, as if a stone had been lifted from his soul, as if a splinter had been drawn from his heart. True love always has a healing ending, Olivier would say later with a subtle smile to journalists, when Vivien was already with someone else. After parting from Olivier, Vivien Leigh periodically ended up in a clinic with acute attacks of manic depression. After one such attack, in July of 1967, she died.